All right. How are you? Are you new? I know there's a lot of new listeners tuning in these days. If so, welcome. This is Yoga Talks Podcast. My name is Jay Brown. It's nice to have you. Thanks for tuning in. For everybody who's returning, what's up? How's everybody doing? Thank you so much, everybody who's been reaching out and checking in with me to find out how I'm doing, how my pain is. I really appreciate all of those supportive emails and sentiments. It really helps. Thank you. I want to let everybody know I am doing much better. I want to talk about it some today. It's perfectly appropriate given the talk we're going to have today with Neil Pearson. In fact, the things that I talk about with Neil in this talk are exactly the things that I'm doing to address my pain situation. For those of you who are tuning in, I should say, I forget sometimes that people tune in and haven't heard other episodes. And just to know, I like to spend a little time before these talks checking in and letting people know what's going on. And some people are into it. I got a little bit of feedback. Some people aren't so into it. If you're not, you can skip ahead. I don't mind. But I do like to take a little time to touch base with people. And those people who've been tuning in know I've been dealing with some pain issues. And, you know, I did a good job after I spoke to you last time. That week, I did a really good job of resting, and it got way, way better. And come Friday, I was feeling a lot better, and I was feeling so much more in my right mindset. And I jumped right back in and did a full weekend's worth of work. And by the time I was done with the weekend, I had sort of slid back some. Ugh. I hate how I do that. And I know I'm not the only one where, like, you get yourself into a situation and then you do things to address it and make it better so you can go back to doing all the things that led to that situation in the first place. So, I caught it and it's fine, and I rested more this week and it is better. I'm better this week than I was 2 weeks ago, that's for sure. And I feel like I'm on the right track with it. And, you know, as I said last week, it really is about more than my physiology. It's more than my 7th cervical and my thoracic outlet. I know that has something to do with it, but where this pain is coming from, I believe, is rooted somewhere else. And I try not to get too new agey with stuff, but I just can't help but think it's related. You know, this week is a huge week for me. 2 days ago was my 44th birthday. And today, actually, not the day this is coming out, but the day I'm recording this, which is a few days before, is my 10-year wedding anniversary. And, you know, I have to say, for the first time, I feel like I understand what is meant by the term midlife crisis. I mean, first of all, I thought about it for a second, and I hadn't thought about it before, but there aren't any men in my family who live like really to 80 or past 80. So I'm more than halfway through my life at this point. And I've just been realizing that you spend this time maybe like in your early 20s discovering who you're going to be, and you work to kind of build something. Maybe you meet somebody, you form a partnership, you make a life together, you live together, and you get to a point right around where I am now, and it seems like there's another big change that has to happen. Like what I set up with my wife 10 years ago has worked great into my adulthood, and now I can see that we're going to have to make some changes. I can see like we're not going to be in this apartment that we're in now for a lot longer, like maybe a little while longer, but we're going to have to move. I can see it already. And this yoga center I'm sitting in recording tonight, it's got another 1.5 years on the lease. I'm going to negotiate with the landlord in about 6 months, and we're going to see. I mean, I think we're going to stay, but I don't know. It could change. Even though I stay in the yoga center, I think I'm going to have to move my family So it makes sense to me. I can see why, if I didn't have a sense of like myself right now, like inside myself, if I didn't feel okay with who I am, the uncertainty of having to like create something new or make change later in my life. In my 20s, I felt like game. I was like, bring it on. I'm going to do it, whatever it is. But now I don't want to deal. I just want to be more comfortable, I guess, or something, right? So doing it now feels so crazy. I could see why someone would, like blow their life up and leave their marriage or buy a red sports car or whatever it is that people do when they have to deal with this. If you don't have a good sense of who you are, how are you going to face it? Fortunately, I am feeling okay. I feel like I'm going to handle it. I feel like relatively positive about the situation, ultimately. And one of the things that's making me feel really positive about that situation is my relationship with my wife is very sound. I'm really feeling deeply in love with my wife, and that's because we did have our 10-year anniversary, as I mentioned. It's today, actually, but we celebrated yesterday. And it's funny, I hope she's not going to get mad at me for sharing this, but it's important, and I want to talk about it because I believe it's helping me heal my pain, which is that we wanted to celebrate our 10-year wedding anniversary originally by taking a big trip somewhere. We're going to go to Greece. We're going to go to some island and be together, which is what we did on our honeymoon. We went to Virgin Islands, and so we wanted to do that, but we couldn't do it. A number of reasons made it impossible for us to do it. So the plan is next year on our 11-year anniversary, we're going to do what we plan to do in our 10-year. So this year was really just going to be like a usual, which means we go out to dinner, basically. Sometimes we pick a new restaurant, but usually we pick one of our favorite places and we go have a quiet dinner together. We're gone for a couple hours, and we hope our children don't make my sister-in-law or the babysitters crazy for too long before we get back home. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to just go to dinner. I didn't want to be in public with my wife. I just wanted to be with my wife without children, just the two of us, like it was at one point in our lives. So I just threw down a bunch of money and got a hotel room. And we just went and we spent like 4 hours in a hotel room last night. And it was wonderful. It was everything I wanted. I got us some nice little food, and we sat together, and I looked at my wife, and I touched her, and I kissed her, and I had sex with her, and I felt us together the way that we started, with this whole thing. And that was what I wanted. It was worth every dollar I paid to have that couple of hours. We even slept. We slept for like the last 45 minutes. It was so perfect. And I said this to her last night, and I'm just saying it again. I'm saying it again here for the public world in all eternity to hear, that I love my wife so much. I just couldn't do anything I'm doing in my life without her. She's the most important thing. I know sometimes I think she doesn't feel as appreciated as she is. I need to try to make sure she knows that. I just couldn't be more thankful to have such a wonderful woman in my life, helping me be me and do everything I'm doing. So thank you, Audrey. I love you so much. Okay, so today's talk is with Neil Pearson. And I just have to say a few things about this. Those of you who've listened to the podcast in the past know I have kind of a rule where I don't make disclaimers about a podcast before it happens. This time there's a couple disclaimers, not on content, but on recording quality. We had a very problematic recording session, Neil and I. I've been really lucky. Originally, my idea was I'm just going to record these in person. I wanted to look somebody in the eye, and lately, they've all been these call recordings because it just wasn't logistically possible. Although I do have some new episodes coming up that were recorded in person. One of them's with Annika Lucas next week. But with Neil was the first time I really ran into trouble where we were running into interference and it actually dropped out a couple of times. I kept having to ask him to repeat himself. And I considered trying to reschedule, but it wasn't easy to get him in the first place. And ultimately, when I listened to it back with all of the trouble, there was enough there that was really important that I felt it was worth it. So I edited it together, and I believe it's a great conversation. You can hear it's there, but you're going to hear a few moments. You're going to hear a few rocky points. And I've been really diligent about trying to give you guys good quality recordings. So just to know, this is a little bit of some rocky recording, but I think you can hear everything, and I think everything we talk about is super important. One thing that we talk about in particular, which I always like to mention, is that a very effective way to deal with pain and just facilitate your health in general is to have simple exercises that you can do to cultivate awareness and to cultivate self-regulation skills. And if you were looking for something to help you with that, I want to suggest that you might go to jbrownyogavideo.com. I've got some practice video there that you can use, and I also have an online course. By the way, those of you who've been completing the course and sending me questions, I'm really excited about that. In fact, we were thinking about making a few supplemental videos to answer some of the questions that you guys are sending. So if you finished the online course and you had some questions, you can send them to me. You can do that at jbrownyogavideo.com. And those of you who haven't been there, you might check it out. Okay, I think that's pretty good for now. Let's go ahead and talk to Neil Pearson, and I will be with you guys again on the other side. Cheers. Well, Neil, it's great to talk to you, my friend. We have known each other via the internet for a few years, but we never really had a conversation like this before.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. It's interesting to finally get a chance to chat.
Yeah, and I was thinking back to when I first met you, and that I always do that whenever I'm going to have a talk with someone. And I was thinking that it was when I was writing some articles for the International Association of Yoga Therapists, I believe.
Oh, right.
I had written a few things for Kelly McGonigal. She was the editor there. And they had a couple of publications, right? Back in the day, it was Yoga Therapy in Practice, and then it became Yoga Therapy Today. And then there was the International Journal of Yoga Therapy. And then I had something that was about pain in one of those articles, and you wrote me a really lovely email.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. And what struck me the most about your email was this like really beefy title you had, which was the chair of the Canadian Physiotherapy Pain Science Division. And I said to my wife, I was like, the Pain Science Division guy liked my article. And so later on, as I got to know you more and sort of know your viewpoint, I've always kind of appreciated how we do see eye to eye in a few things, but you have a very different background than I do. Mm-hmm. And so yeah. I really appreciate that because science background sometimes says different things than it feels like you say. And so I guess I wanted to start there. And can you say how you became the chair of the Canadian Physiotherapy Pain Science Division?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a great place to start. So I've been a physiotherapist for 30 years now. Very early on, I got very interested in the whole area of pain, mainly because patients I was working with were telling me stories. It wasn't consistent with what I learned in school. And so it made me very, very, very curious. And so that curiosity led me to, working with people with persistent pain and complex chronic pain conditions for a long time. So as the science started to develop and as there started to become more interest in the physiotherapy world at rather than just treating the physical body, but trying to help people with what we thought was going on in the pain systems. There was
sorry, for a second. Is that what physiotherapy means? Like, can you say what physiotherapy is in terms of physical therapy?
The words physiotherapy and physical therapy are really synonymous. So it's more of a British and Canadian thing to call it physiotherapy or physical therapy.
Oh, I see. So they're interchangeable.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
I see. All right. So in terms of physical therapy or physiotherapy, as they call it in Canada, I guess, you were saying that there was some science that was changing.
Right. So we're starting to learn that a lot of the techniques that physiotherapists do or physical therapists do actually have more than just effects on the physical body. They also affect the nervous systems, sort of course, right? And so there was this growing interest in this within the Canadian physiotherapy world. A group of us went to our national organization, physiotherapy organization, and created a division or a group that was specifically looking at how to move our profession forward with this understanding around pain science. So I was part of that initial group and ended up being the founding chair of the science division. Right.
Wow. So now this pain science that you were becoming the head of to look at, what can you say more about that in terms of, you said it's not just one thing, but it's more than that.
Right. So, well, I guess I would say that generally within physical therapy training, we're taught, to really focus on changing the physical tissues of the body. So when we're trained as physical therapists, most of our focus is on treating a person's joints, muscles, tendons, ligaments, things like that. Physical therapists do a lot more than that, but that's a lot of our focus. And so what the science world was saying is treatments that we're doing, part of their effectiveness is because of they're actually changing how the nervous system is. Back up just a little bit, it'll explain a little bit more. Whenever we're injured, of course, there's a problem that happens to the body, and the body is now sending danger signals to the brain to tell the brain, that something is wrong and behavior needs to change. So when we have pain, the pain that we have from the injury has both to do with what happened in the body, but also how those signals get transferred up into the nervous systems and into the brain. And so the science was saying is, increase our focus on how can we change the way the body is signaling the nervous systems in the brain, not only how can we change the body.
Mm. And so that's been your focus in the work that you do, is how to change the signals in terms of our nervous systems more than just like manipulating muscles and bones.
Yes. So it has to do with expanding our model of what we're doing to include not just the body, but also to include the nervous systems and to provide treatment that works on both.
Right. And so what does that mean? How do you affect a nervous system?
Well,
what does that mean? Because you can just listen to music and that affects the nervous system.
Absolutely. What we start to look at, or what science is starting to look at, is how could you change the signals in the nerves in the body, the nerves in the spinal cord, the nerves in the brain? How could you change the signals through the automatic nervous systems or the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems? And so, as an example, a really simple example, if you sprain your wrist and you have an injury, you have pain, so there are signals that are going from there to your brain to tell you that there's a problem and you need to do something. If you were to place a hot pack or an ice pack on your wrist, that not only changes what's happening in the tissues in your wrist, but also changes how the signals are going from there into your nervous system and up to your brain. And so the change in pain that you experience has both to do with what's happening in your body in terms of the tissue in your wrist, but also in the nervous system activity. So to give you another example of that, so say it was your wrist. And that the signals are going from your wrist up through your neck and spinal cord and up to your brain, it's possible that we could put another input into your nervous system to try to change that. And so another input we could do, it's possible that by, say in physical therapy world, by mobilizing or moving the joints of your neck, when you do that, you're going to be changing other signals coming from your neck up to your brain. And it's possible that those signals could actually modify experiencing because they're actually inhibiting some of the signals from your wrist.
I see. So what I get from that is you're saying that by doing things with our bodies, a lot of times it's about signals that are sent more than trying to make this muscle longer or this joint more mobile.
Only word I change in there is more.
More. I see. Okay, I get that. More, I get the reason to take issue with more.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's track back a little bit because you jumped right into like the meat of the work, and I'm curious more about like how you personally come by way of this. I know when we first started, you said something about you had patients that were having these issues that led you to some of this, but what about before then? Like, what got you to be a physical therapist or physiotherapist in the first place?
Oh, okay. Well, actually, way back when I finished high school, my plan was to be a physical education teacher.
Oh.
Through that program at university here, and partway through the program, we were taking courses in anatomy and physiology, and I started to get way more interested in the topics than I had ever been before in anything. And there were actually a lot of physical therapy students taking those very same classes. And when I met them and talked to them, I realized that was probably the path that I started to realize that possible work as a physical therapist was teaching people one-on-one rather than just teaching people in courses.
I see. So you wanted to actually have more interpersonal interaction.
Well, yeah, I think, it's interesting. So back then I didn't really think about exactly what it was I wanted. It just the right path.
I see. Just that's the way it went.
Yeah. So I moved from the physical education training into the physical therapy training.
I see. And so along the way, when did you get to be the chair? Like, what year was it when you became the head of the pain science division?
I'm thinking back. I think it was around 2007. So I'd already been a physical therapist for 22 years by then.
Okay. And so to me, that's interesting because when I'm thinking back to when we first had our exchange, I remember thinking, why have I never heard of Neil before at the IYT? And I think I actually asked you that, and you kind of answered back, I don't know. And then just before talking to you today, like I got the most recent Yoga Therapy Today, and there's like a featured article from you in there. So that has changed some, right?
It has. I had been previously working in science division. I really had been working, just doing my own stuff and sort of advancing my knowledge. And I didn't realize that there were so many other people out there who were also interested in this area.
I see. And so at a certain point, you started to become aware of the IYT.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I guess.
So I took my. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, I don't know how I feel about the IYT right now, honestly. I mean, my main issue is that this definition of yoga therapy that they're working with, for me, feels like it's not really enough of a distinction between yoga therapy and yoga. That seems to always be the issue there.
Right.
And, the definition, I'm going to read it because it's right here in front of me. It says, yoga therapy is the process of empowering individuals to progress toward improved health and well-being through the application of the teachings and practices of yoga. I just feel like that's not enough of a distinction in my mind. And I know other people want to make it more that it's about targeting specific conditions sometimes. Mm-hmm. And to me, that really goes to kind of a topic that I'm curious to hear you speak about, which is sort of this idea of prescriptive versus process, right? Like some people are diagnosing and then applying yogic practices as like a way to address them in a prescriptive mode, like I know what to do to fix that. And then other people, it's much more of a process of someone discovering something for themselves. And I'm wondering, where do you land in there? Or are you somewhere in between? Or what do you say to any of that?
I am somewhere in between. I see the value in using yoga as a process for a lot of people. And I also see that there is value in when you can diagnose a problem, and I don't use that purely in the medical world, but when you can, you have somebody in front of you and you can see a list of the things that are going on in that person, which is less like a diagnosis, but more like a clinical problem list, and then say, okay, if these are the things that are going on with this person, how could we use yoga to directly impact each of those things?
I see. Well, because yoga can be pretty effective at like affecting someone's nervous system, for instance.
Right. Or you've got a person in front of you who feels like they're out of control, right? That what's happened in their life is made them feel out of control. Well, there are practices that we could do in yoga to recreate that, there are things that you can do with your body to feel more in control, things you could do with your breath, things that you could do with your mind or through meditation. We can even use the namas and yamas to work on that sense, rebuilding that sense of control. So to me, there's some sense there, but I also really do with the opportunity to come up with your own answers.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious then, how did you go from being a physiotherapist and at the pain science division to yoga? And I notice also, like on your website, it's not like yoga is like right there at the top. It's kind of down the scroll a little bit. Like it's in there. But what was your entrance into yoga more specifically?
Well, it would have been in the late 1990s. I started to do some yoga classes. Like most people, they were more vinyasa movement-based classes, and I had already been doing meditation before that. So meditation is something I've been interested in a long, long time. Yeah, so when I came to yoga, I fell in love with this ability to do meditation while I was moving. And
so you made a connection between those right away.
Well, right away, because I already practiced meditation, so it was...
You're like, I'm just going to put my mind on this instead of the mantra or whatever else.
Yeah, or just the beauty of greater, in the moment awareness. Sitting, but I'd never practiced it while I was moving so much before.
Oh, right. So where was that? That was in Canada. What was the yoga center that you went to, that you first went to yoga classes to? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, yeah, I do. It was called the Wandering Yogi.
Wandering Yogi.
It was in Wandering Yogi, and it was on Grant Avenue in the Commercial Drive area of Vancouver. But it's not there anymore.
I see.
I'm not sure where the two teachers moved on to, but they were excellent teachers.
And it was like a power vinyasa kind of style?
Yes, yeah. Well, they did more than that, but that were classes that I was.
And did that jive with your sense of like physiotherapy and pain science, to be doing that to to people's bodies? Is that like sound, you think?
I think it doesn't jive when a person's not already fit.
I see. So there's a certain fitness level that would make it appropriate.
I think so. There's a risk in classes like that when I think there's a risk in classes like that when a person doesn't have experience, and that there's a risk when a person misinterprets this idea of almost like what Matthew Remski's talking about around transcending pain. There's a certain amount of physical discomfort and pain you can experience in those classes, and if you aren't mindful of them in the right way, I think that's where the risk can come.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I think in my own personal experience, that was part of the case. I kind of trained myself to withstand pain. Right. And I associated pain as opening. And so to me, like I have a very high threshold for pain now. I just sort of trained myself into it. And now I've had to really untrain myself out of that, because there's patterns, it's like a pattern that you have where you're not even, I think this happens to a lot of yoga teachers. I hate to say it, but where I get into these workshops with people and they have pain that they haven't admitted to.
Yes. I think that's a big problem with where we are around yoga practices, when a person hasn't had the opportunity at the beginning to enhance their ability to be aware of body and breath and thoughts and emotions.
Well, I like to
go back to.
Oh yeah, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, sort of circle back to the, so that's where I started. And the more I practiced yoga, the more I moved to doing practices that were physically forceful. There was still a physical element. And as I did that, I started to realize that what I was doing there almost was a system that was almost exactly like what we were trying to do with people who had chronic pain conditions. So in the world of chronic pain management, I'm not talking about the medical management or the strict psychological management, but what we're trying to do people there is to get them to become aware of and start to regulate their breath, get them to start to become aware of their body tension, and then start to learn how to regulate that and start to release that. Get them to learn how to move with some ease again. Because we know that when we move with ease, the ability to move with ease is analgesic. When we move gently, and while we're doing that, we're breathing calmly and keeping our mind calm and our body calm. This changes the chemistry of our body. And it helps release chemicals that help to decrease our pain. So we're actually, as a colleague of mine says, we're opening up our own medicine cabinet that's inside us.
Ooh, I like that a lot. That's great. And you know what I'll say? I like the way that you keep saying the word awareness. And that seems to me to be such a crucial part of what you're saying, like awareness of your breath, awareness of how your body's moving as like a basic building block of what we're talking about.
Right. And I think that's when we look at the science, we start to realize that when a physical therapist puts their hands on you, or when a massage therapist, puts their hands on you, when those things happen, or even when a yoga teacher puts their hand on you, this one of the things that happens is it sort of floods your brain with this body awareness information, and that in itself is a pain management tool and a tool to help us get better.
Well, also,
and if that,
what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
I was going to say, if that sounds odd, just to flip it around the other way, we know that when a person has ongoing pain, that there are disruptions or distortions of our ability to feel our body properly. So sometimes when we're in pain, our body can feel distorted. It could feel like vague or muddy or too small, too big. In some people, some people say, I can't even really feel that part of my body anymore.
It just goes numb or something.
Well, yeah, and it's not just numb. It's almost like, I'm sure you've heard people talking about when we see the world without really being mindful, it's like we're trying to see it through a whole bunch of veils.
Yeah. Muddied glasses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that seems to be a problem in terms of people and pain is that it's like the pain disrupts your ability to feel your body well. And when you can't feel your body well, not only does it make it hard for you to figure out how to move your body well, but that seems to almost feed the pain. And so we believe you can end up in this cycle of pain disrupting your ability to feel your body, and that actually feeds back into pain, and you end up in this cycle. So the practices of yoga that draw our attention inward, where we actually pay attention to our physical self, can become actually very pain relieving and a big part of our recovery.
And the ability for someone to do that in like a vinyasa class has everything to do with awareness. Like, is it happening to you and you're struggling to keep up or getting pushed along? Or are you able to do that thing? Like, are you steering the ship or not?
Yeah. And how are you, to the skeptic in me says, how are you supposed to do that? How are you supposed to pay attention to your body well when you're trying to keep up?
Yeah. It's too fast and furious. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then we can even go even further is that it's possible that for some people, the reason that they're coming to a practice like yoga is to escape not a physical pain or not to work with physical pain, but to try to escape some mental anguish or spiritual anguish. And then what can happen with body awareness is a person can take all of their awareness, throw it on their body, and never really gets to the awareness of what's really going on.
Yeah, so you acknowledge that a lot of pain in someone's body sometimes.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.